Welcome to this video. My name is Rajveer, founder of Code and Compile, and in this video, I'm going to talk about IND400. I'm back with this device again. In this video, I'm specifically talking about how you can connect to this device via API. In my last video, you might have seen how I'm communicating with this device via MQTT, in which we were publishing some command values and we were subscribing to the weight data. And now, if you need another way to communicate with this device, one is OpenAPI. OpenAPI is quite similar to when you are opening your browser via HTTP and HTTPS. So we are going to see two modes of operation. One is how you can use REST to communicate with this device. Another is via WebSocket. Okay, so let's see some live demos to understand how you can grab the data out of this device via OpenAPI. So starting with what is an OpenAPI? So OpenAPI is a standardized way to communicate with the devices using HTTP and HTTPS, the same language like I told you your web browser is using. So OpenAPI has several advantages. One of them is you don't need any external hardware or software to communication. No drivers are required. You can just work out of the box. Second is it is secure, which is quite ready for Industry 4.0. It's secure, it's encrypted, so you can have a secure encrypted way of communication. And third one is future-proof based on open standards, so if the technology is evolving, you can still use it in your system. And there are two ways how you can communicate in OpenAPI. One is REST. Using REST, you can have one-shot requests. So you send the request and you get the data out. All right, so it's like you have to poll the data. Every time you need some information, send the request and you get the data. This is like REST, the way of communication. Another one is WebSocket. If you need continuously streaming of data, then you can use a WebSocket. We're going to see a live demo of both of them, how we can have communication via REST with our IND400 or via WebSocket for continuously streaming of data. I'm going to use Node-RED and Postman as my interface to connect to IND400. So let's begin with the REST. In REST, we follow OpenAPI initiative, or the IND400 or the Mettler Toledo, they follow OpenAPI initiative. This means they follow a blueprint. They follow a standardized way of communication, standardized way of writing the URLs, handling the authentications and the scripts. It's quite standard. So if your developers are already using OpenAPI, it's quite easy to integrate this device in your software architecture. So what is happening here? We have a client, which is a Revolution Pi. You can have any client, or you can also have a web app. Okay, this client is going to send a request to the IND400. Based on the request, it will send a response back to the client. All right, this is how REST API is working: request and response mode. So we can quickly check this API directly on the web browser because this device supports OpenAPI. To start with OpenAPI is to enable this OpenAPI or API connection in our hardware in this device. So in this case, I will open up my VNC viewer. I've told you in the last video, this device supports VNC. So I can connect to this device directly, remotely. And here I can first try to log in as an admin because I'm going to change my network communication. So in this case, I will log out as operator and enter the user ID, which is 002. This is my admin user ID by default. And now I'm an admin. You can see that here. Now I will go inside the device, and here I'll go to communication. And in communication, you will see Web API Server. So you have to make sure this is enabled. Okay. This device supports HTTP and HTTPS for secure and encryption. I will just use HTTP as of now. Make sure this is enabled. This is disabled by default. Once this is done, you can now directly go to the interface of this device. So just put the IP address of this device on the top, and you will have this web page. Okay, once you enable the OpenAPI or the Web API Server. Now the step number one is you have to first authenticate yourself. You can't just directly get the data out or push the value. You have to authenticate yourself. In this case, you need to know your admin user ID or password. In my case, I will click on this one and I can directly check things here. First, I will show you how you can directly check on this web interface before actually deploying your applications in the API. So click on this user login, and then you will see there's a button called try it out. And here you can see there's already a type authorization bearer is already selected. And here you have to put your user ID. If you don't put your user ID and click on execute, it will say unauthorized. So you can see that you have a feedback as well coming out. So just put your user ID. Password I don't have, so it's just 002. I click on execute and you see already I have a token. This is the access token. This token I use further on to post some information and get some information out of my device. So authentication token is number one step. So by default, my authentication token is already stored in some variable in this web interface. So what I can do now is I can just go to, let's say, get the devices in the scope. I will get some device information. And you can see that authorization is already stored. This is the token number which I created before. And now let's try it out. And I execute. And you can see that now I have an ID. This is my device ID or scale ID. And this is some information. There's type terminal. This is the serial number. And this is the scale, analog scale. So I have some information coming for the device. What I can do now, let's go to the scale specific functionality. Let's get scale in the scope. So I can try it out and click on execute. Now I have this as my scale ID. And this is my scale 1, type scale, description analog scale. So let's just copy the scale ID, okay? Because next what I'm going to do is get the measurement. So to get the measurement, I have to provide the scale ID. That's why I got the scale ID. I copy that ID. Now I'm going to try it out. I paste this here, scale ID that I copied, and execute. And now you can see that I have my information coming. The weight is 0.507. And this you can also see in my VNC viewer, and you can also see in my live camera. So I have a box on my device. So if I remove this one and put another one, and I can again click execute. Let's see, code 101. There you go. Now you have the weight 0.207 grams. Okay, so this is kilograms. So this is how you can get the information just by directly interfacing on the browser. If you want, you can also tear the preset, clear the tear, or you can tear the balance as well. So you have multiple ways to interact with your device. Okay, before I jump to Node-RED, let's do one more example. So we got the measurement, and now let's tear the scale. In this case, let's try it out. I will again put the ID of my scale, and I execute. And once I execute, you will notice on my screen here, now the weight is 0 because this becomes the tear value. So that's how I could also tear my scale using OpenAPI. And if I want to clear the tear memory, I can also try it out. Just put the scale ID here, execute, and now this is executed with a positive response. And you can see that now the tear value is gone, and this is the net weight of my device, of my object. All right, so these were typical functions that we use to play around, tear the value, clear the tear, get the measurements. Now, this is just the testing interface. Now let's say I want to build a small application on Node-RED to get the information exactly the way I'm doing here. So how can you do that? In this case, we will do a demo on Node-RED. So this we have seen how we can do that using our web interface, enabling the API server, testing REST API using IND400 API interface. And now we're going to see how we can do that using Node-RED. In this case, my Node-RED is running in my Revolution Pi, which is my client. It could also be a computer or any other edge device, doesn't matter. You just need to have a possibility to send HTTP request, okay? I'm going to send some requests and get the data out of it. So let's go back to my screen. This is my Node-RED. Now here I have an inject node. And here if you just type HTTP, you will find HTTP request, okay? And then I will go to debug node. Now I will use this screen to get my URL, how to I connect to the specific API points. So in this case, first step was login. So what you don't see behind that is the URL, which is the IP address of my IND400 and the version. This is a pre-text before that. So I will just put it manually here. So in this case, I will going to do post request, because if you notice here, this is a post request. I'm going to enter some information. So let's type HTTP, and now comes the IP address of my API server or of my device. This I know by heart because this is connected in my network. And then comes the version, which is, this is my current version. You can find this version information when you purchase the hardware. I think it's also mentioned in the hardware terminal information. And now comes the URL, which is the path, which is the login here. So here you can just put login, all right? Now the question is, where comes the data which we entered here, user ID and password? This you have to enter manually. So here you can take a function node, or you can also write in the timestamp, but it's okay, just to make it looks clear. I can type payload is equivalent to, let me zoom it out a little bit. This is now in my JSON format. I will put user ID, and this syntax is very important. You can also notice that here, this is a user ID, and here you can see that this is user ID. This is very important, otherwise you will not be able to connect. This is in my string format, 002. Password, I do not have, is also in the string format. And this format, if it's string or integer, you can always find here. This is a string, password is also string, all right? You can match that. This is done, just click on done, and let's see if this works. If we get the access token, deploy. This is my debug window, let's hit. Oh, we got the access token, super easy. What I can also do is to make it look easy, I will parse the JSON object. And then I will have a JSON object, I can easily use that one, okay? So this is the step. What you can also do is you can download this YML file, which has all the syntax written, the standardized syntax following the Open API initiative. You can also download that, give it to your developers, and they know what to do with that. Okay, so now what we have done is we have got the access token. I told you that here somehow this access token was stored. We're going to do the same here. Let's take a function, and I'm going to store that into a variable, flow.set. Let's call it access token. And this is going to store the information which I get from this node. Message.payload.access token. I can copy this path from here, and I can directly put it here. That's it. And now we can just close this and connect that together. Let's deploy it. Let's try one more time. When I inject, I got a new access token, and if I go to my context data, because this is my flow variable inside it, I can refresh that, and you can see that this is my access token already coming here. All right. This was the scale ID I was using before. Let's just delete that. So I have my access token coming over here. Now, what was the second step we did? We can get the scale, get all devices. Let's go to the scale, get all scales in the scope. Okay. If you remember, if I executed that, I got the scale ID. I need the scale ID. In this case, this is my path, scales. So what I will do is, let's just copy that. Let's rename that to login. I will get scale ID. Now, if you remember here, this is my get function. In this case, I make sure this is my get function. And now the path was scales. So in this case, I can just put here instead of login, scales. Click on done. Okay, so in this case, you see here we have an authorization. So to have an authorization, now I don't need to log in again. I need to get to use this token, which was generated in the first flow. So here, instead of message.payload like this, we will change something. We will type message.header. This will be an object. This is correct, message.header. And let's first grab this access token. So I will type var access token is equivalent to flow.get. This is just a function in Node-RED that once you want to get the information of this variable, you use flow.get. If you want to set this, you do flow.set. So this function is going to give me this value, put it in the access token. All right. Now I will type message.header.authorization. This is the predefined syntax. This will have an authorization bearer type, which we have seen here as well. And then there's a space in between. So you can type here bearer space plus this access token. So this should be in the header once you're trying to get the information, because this, you can see that this is the header. So we have an authorization, which is bearer space and then the access token. Authorization is bearer space and access token. Let's see if that works. So we do that, deploy it, and let's one more time get the access token. And here we have some JSON parse error. Let's see, there's some problem in our syntax. Sorry, it is headers with S. Typo. All right, let's try one more time. There you go. Now we have an object. In this object, you can notice you have the scale ID. So we got the scale by HTTP request. Now we need to store the scale ID again for the next step in which we need to read the measurements. So I'll take the same function here, which I have flow.set. Instead of this access token, I will call it scale ID. And this is the path. I can copy that and paste here. So this will now store my scale ID. Let's try one more time. Get the access token, get the scale ID, and store it. So now we can see in my context data, I refresh it, I have my scale ID. Perfect. I got the scale ID because the next step is to get the measurements. In this case, I can see here, access to measurements, get the measurement in which I need a scale ID. You can also do it by device ID, but I'm using scale ID example. So this scale ID, now I have it. So let's go back again. And this is get measurement. And now notice that here, if you notice, the scale ID is in the URL. Okay, this parameter is in the URL itself. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this URL. Just remove this URL because this is a customized URL. We're going to create this URL here. So we need the access token. This is fine. Now I'm going to type message.url is equivalent to, I know it's a string, HTTP 192.168.0.58, and it's scales. Remember the path, you can always refer to that. Scales, then this slash, and then scale ID. So here I will put plus scale ID, and then plus what I need, measurements. This is also string. Let me verify measurements. Now, how do I get the scale ID? The same way I got the access token. I will take a new variable, scale ID, and I'm going to read the scale ID here. There we go. Super easy. Just put the semicolon. Sometimes I forget that. Now it should work because our URL is, sorry, one more time, I forgot the version. This is very, very important. So you have version, scales, scale ID, measurements. Let's see if this works. So we got the authentication, we got the scale ID, and we have some problem. Invalid scale ID. Let's verify that. Why it's invalid? All right, I know the problem. If you notice the syntax, this slash is missing here. Sorry, my mistake. Let's put it here. Otherwise, it's mixing these two strings together. Click on that, and now we should be able to see. There you go. We have the measurements, and there you can see that the measurement is 0.208 kilogram. This is what you can see on my device as well. And this is the same information. You can see that here as well. All right, so we have got this measurement now, okay? So this was just about logging in via API, getting the scale ID, getting the measurement. Now let's see if we want to tear the scale, how we can do that. To tear the scale, what do we need? Let's see here some example. We have here commands, tear the balance. Here you need ID of the scale. This we already have. So let's just try now. I will copy this one. Let's call it tear the scale. Here the syntax is scale, scale ID, tear. So we have scales, scale ID. Instead of measurement, I just need to write tear. That's it. In this case, this will tear the scale. Let's deploy that. And now if you see here, let me just maybe, you can see on my screen, I have weight 0.208 kilogram. This is the current weight. So now if I tear the scale, this will tear the value. Okay, there has a JSON parse error. So the tear the scale, if you notice here, it's a post request. So you have to make sure this is here on the post. This is not a get information. That's why I got the error. So now you can see that I have a feedback, and you can see on my screen the weight has been tear. You can see that here as well. Okay. Now if I want to clear this tear, I just need to change the syntax. I'll copy paste that here. Clear the tear. The syntax is tear minus clear. You can see that here as well. Clear the tear memory, tear minus clear. There is no other parameters. Just do this one here, and let's deploy. And you can see that already I have a tear here, and if I inject this should be gone. Tear is gone, and you can see the weight. So you can see that this is pretty much I was doing in my last video by publishing the value to the broker. Here we can do that using OpenAPI as well, using the REST connection. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we are going to check the same if you want to have a different interface using Postman. Okay, Postman is another way where you can send the REST queries, and you can also do a WebSocket. This we will do in the end. So here, let's check what we have done here. I've already made some examples. So here you can see if I have a post tab open, and in this post I have a base URL, which is http 192.168.0.58. This is the IP address of my device, and the version v1.0.0. This is the version I was using, same in the Node-RED. And then /login. So if you see that this is the same URL here compared to the last request, that's the same URL. Okay, it's just the information is stored in the variables. And these variables you can see I have defined in my global, base URL I have defined here, versions I have defined here, access token I have defined here, measurement ID and device ID. So in the post request, I have a body. This is the same as my Node-RED. So in my login, I have this body. You can just copy this part, put it here, and click on send. You should get an access token. So this is a new access token now on my screen. Okay, what I can do is I can copy that, and I can go to my global variables, just I was doing in my Node-RED, put this access token here and press enter. Now this is saved in my variable access token. The same variable I was using here as well, access token, I'm using the same in Postman. Now this is saved. So once I log in, this access token is saved, and login you just do once. And now I go click on get device ID, or you can also call it you can also get scale ID, device ID. Now here the URL is base URL, version, devices, and then $authorization. This is important. This is how your syntax has been created. In our Node-RED, we were doing it by message.header. Here, message.headers, and then authorization beer plus access token. But in Postman, you can do it like this. Okay, there are different ways to do that. So here, my access token, which was saved, now it's over here. Okay, this is the syntax of that. I can click on send, and you can see that I will get some response. Okay, this is the ID that I got, the device ID, and I stored that into my variable here. This is my device ID. Okay, now to get the measurements, I need base URL, version, devices. So before I was using scales, I told you can also do by devices. Here it's the devices, and then the device ID. This is the same device ID I just stored. And then measurement, $authorization beer and token. So this is another URL to get the measurements. If I click on send, I will get the measurements now here, 0.208. Okay. And then you can also subscribe to this data. This is another URL, base URL, version, measurements, measurement ID. So this URL or this link is defined here. So if you see the subscription part, I think I was having it here. Subscribe is measurement and measurement ID. Which one is here? Measurement ID. On top, you also have to make sure you have authorization added to it. And if I click on send, I will get the measurement as well, subscription. Finally, comes to the part where we talk about WebSocket. So let's go back to the presentation. Here we have seen how we can use REST API using Node-RED and request the data and get the response. Just to make it more interesting, I actually made a small demo where I can show you. I've created a small dashboard. So this is my REST API flow that I was playing around. And here, if I open the dashboard, you can see this is my dashboard. Let me just make it a bit smaller. So I have my REST API admin login. I can just put here my admin. If I put wrong, if I put 001, you will see I will have a feedback, invalid login details, please try again. I have to make sure I have a correct login user ID. 002, you can say I get feedback, successfully logged in, and API access token is issued. And now my token has been saved in my flow. And I can click on device info. This is my device info. And now if I click on this get measurements, you can see my measurement is coming. So this is quite similar to what was happening before, but here just I have a dashboard in this case. And now I can put a new box you can see on my screen, which is 508 grams. I can click on get measurements, and I got the weight here. All right. And now if I want, I can tear the scale directly from here. And now you can see that the value has been tear. And you can also see that over here. And I can also clear the tear. The tear has been cleared. And I can also zero the scale if I want. All right. So this is about just an interesting way to visualize information using Web API on the Node-RED dashboard. Now, coming back to the presentation, we have seen how we can do that using REST API. Now, the second step, which I want to talk about, is WebSocket, in which you have a data subscription. You can subscribe to the data and you have streaming of data coming in. All right. In this case, you just need one-time connection. We call it handshake. And then you have persistent connection. You have data keep on coming. So in our live demo, we just subscribe to the measurement. And once you subscribe that, based on if the value of measurement has been changed, you get the new input. Okay. It's more similar to when you subscribe to the data in MQTT. As soon as the value changes, you get a new value automatically. You don't have to ping it again. It will just come. All right. So let's see this example again. I'm going to use Postman as my application for that. So in my Postman, we have seen before how you can post the information, get the information, and now we're going to check the WebSocket. So you can create a WebSocket connection from here. You can click on New, and here you will see a WebSocket, and if you click on that, you will have a new WebSocket connection. All right. Similarly, you can also create a REST API connection, which was in my collection. You can create add request. This will give you a get request, or you can change this get request to post request. So you can play around with that. But let's come to our WebSocket. So in my WebSocket, I already have defined the URL. So the first thing is you need to have an IP address prefix with ws:/192.168.0.58. This is how you define your WebSocket IP address. And then comes after that the version, which is the same version we were using in REST APIs, version 1.0.0. This depends on your hardware, so you have to make sure which version you're using. Then you have measurements. This is a syntax. Then measurement ID. We have already stored that in our global variables. And then there are some parameters. So this question mark means now we're going to write some parameters. You can see the parameters here as well. Stable, which is true. You can make it true or false. This means you should get the value only when it is stable. Then you can make it true. If not, you can make it false. Threshold is 0.5 and unit is kilogram. So threshold means minimum change in the weight, which will trigger a streaming response. So if the value is 1 kg, if the value becomes 1.6 kg, then it will give you another value. So this is a threshold. If the value is 1.1, it will not give you a value. Then comes the authorization, which is bearer space access token, the token which you have already saved before. So once you make sure that your URL is correctly defined, you can click on connect. And then there is some error. It could not connect. So let's verify that. So in this case, maybe my access token has been expired. So I have to generate one, but I will go through the steps again. So let's generate the access token again. So now I have a new token. I will copy that and I will go to my global variables, which was, I believe, here. And I will save that here. Okay. And now let's see if this is working. Just testing one more time. Get device ID. This is same. Then this is the measurement ID. This is also the same. And let's see if we get the value here. Yeah, the value is updating. So my REST API is working. Let's come back to my WebSocket. Now let's see if I can connect. There you go. So it could be that my access token was expired. Now I have the value here, 0.0. There is no weight. So let's put some weight. I put the weight, and now there should be value coming, 0.507. You can see the value is updated here already, 0.507. So I did not have to send another post request or get request. I already have my value updated here. I can take it out and I can put another box. You can see now the value is updated here. So my values keep on updating automatically. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you using WebSocket. But wait a second, you should have multiple message here. Let's disconnect and connect again, just to check. So this is 0.2, 0.2050. Now you have 0.715. So you can see that continuously streaming of messages are coming. Sometimes you also see that the message is populated one below the other, but this is just the way it is showing you the message. So here you can also see the messages over here, 0.507. And if I click on that, this message is gone. So this is like continuously streaming of data in Postman. So we have seen two ways to connect to the API. One is via REST API, another is via WebSocket. You can choose whatever you like. If your application demands creating visualizations, some dashboards, you can use WebSocket connection. If your application demands just to get the data when you need it, that you need to poll it by pressing some buttons, then you can use REST API. Feel free to use the one you want. So this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you try WebSocket or API for what applications. And if you have any doubt in this video, feel free to comment and I'll get back to you. Thank you for watching. Have fun. Take care. Bye-bye.